we were pumped. I think we're about to hear a gasp in a second. We raised $80,000 and sold a quarter of the company.
At the time in Box, you could upload the file, and then you would click and download the file.
Yes. These are like very esoteric jokes for people. So, so always just keep the quality bar incredibly high, not only of what you build, but of the team that you have. I got up here a little bit late. My Maserati was just getting out of the garage, so just had to deal with that for a little bit. So
challenges,
yeah. But can't imagine anybody would have any context on that situation. So everything you just heard was a total lie about fundraising. So I'm going to give you the real truth of when you should actually give up if you get no's constantly. So we'll go through that.
All right, well, on that note, let's get started. Welcome to Between Two Founders. I'm Jeff Seibert. I'm the founder and CEO of Digits. We've spent the past 6 years building the world's first AI-native accounting platform. We work with hundreds of top startups, including a bunch of great founders in the room with us, so thank you all. Digits is the third venture-backed company I've started. I was previously founder and CEO of Crashlytics, and then after that, head of product at Twitter post-acquisition. But the reason we're here today is way back in 2007, I had the opportunity to run Stanford University's Entrepreneurial Thought Leaders Seminar Series. And we invited amazing entrepreneurs, Mark Zuckerberg, Reid Hoffman, Vinod Khosla. And what I'm really
You guys have the famous video online, right, of Zuck?
We literally do.
Wow,
yes,
what
yes.
a great, everybody should watch that like once a year.
I completely agree.
Okay.
Marissa Mayer gave an incredible talk. It was just such a special moment in sort of the tech scene in Silicon Valley. And so what I'm really excited about with Between Two Founders is the opportunity to highlight today's generation of amazing founders and entrepreneurs. And so today, we have a legend with us, Aaron Levie. You've been the...
But you didn't invite me to the ETL event. Interesting. Very suspicious.
Well,
okay.
it's all worked out.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay.
So Aaron's been the founder, CEO of Box for almost 20 years, from his dorm room through IPO and beyond. He's also one of the original pioneers of the cloud software movement, and I'm probably best known for your Twitter commentary, millions of followers, for better or worse.
That's too bad, yeah.
So please join me in welcoming Aaron Levie.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad that our PR team told you that you had to include that I helped create the cloud industry. This is great. So, very accurate.
We know the messaging we want to communicate.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I wanted to start way back in the day.
Yeah.
So you dropped out of college.
Yes.
Why?
Well, there's two reasons. Basically, Box was starting to take off, and and in this context, take off in the sense of like we had, I don't know, probably like $100,000 in revenue or something like that. So for us, this was like, wow, this is actually happening. And then the second reason was I just hated college. So maybe if I was super good at college, like I would have kept going, but I mean, I loved my friends in college, but like I was just a pretty bad student. And so that contributed to, kind of just always having a lot of frenetic energy around creating different ideas. Box happened to be, the one that ended up kind of taking off. It tried lots of other startup ideas, but it kind of got to a point where it was working well enough that my kind of ROI calculus was this would be just much more exciting, and I'd regret this more if I didn't pursue this this direction than staying in school. So my co-founder Dylan, we dropped out our junior year of college, moved to the Bay Area, and then we had two other friends drop out of their respective colleges as well, and that was kind of the founding team of Box.
So I want to take it back because a lot of folks here are very early stage.
Yeah.
How did you come up with the original idea for Box? Like, what struck you?
Yeah. So again, lots of other ideas, and the reason why sometimes just like your idea can't just be bad, and so like we should just be totally honest about that. And I had many of those prior to Box, so Box was the first thing that kind of actually started to come together, but had done kind of random startup ideas for probably about five years or so. From high school to college, and tried a bunch of different startup things. kind of everybody who was in college in like the mid 2000s would build like an online kind of service for like figuring out like the parties on campus and all the events. So I had one of those. You sort of just had to do that in that period of time as a requirement. I had a search engine that was like just like substantially worse than Google on every dimension. So that obviously didn't take off. A bunch of other ideas like that. And fortunately, I had a well-timed project in college to study a market. I was getting my undergrad in business and to study a market and identify like where there would be like an opportunity to basically, what were the opportunities of this particular market. And most people did things like shoes and restaurants, and I randomly chose. It wasn't obviously random, but like I don't exactly know why it all came together. But I chose this idea of online storage, and the idea was in the early 2000s, late 90s, there were a bunch of companies that had this pretty straightforward idea, which is once everybody moves to the internet, you'll store data online and then access it from your computer anywhere. So we clearly didn't invent the idea of putting information online. That had come out in the 90s. The problem was it was cost prohibitive. It was too slow. The internet was simply too slow back then, and we didn't have a lot of the modern application standards that we now obviously have, but didn't even have maybe 20 years ago. And so looked at this market, and it was this kind of really interesting moment, because the more I studied this, the more I was surprised that nobody had emerged in this time. At this point, it was 2004. That nobody had emerged in 2004 to solve this problem, which is like storage is way cheaper than it was 5 years ago. The internet's way faster than it was 5 years ago. Browsers are way better than they were 5 years ago. Why has nobody come and created a new internet service for storing data? So through that project, I was just like, oh my God, like, am I missing something? Like, why are there not a ton more people paying attention to this? So put together kind of initial prototype, kind of put the website online, went after lots of bloggers at the time that were writing about websites. This was before kind of TechCrunch and everything kind of emerged. And people just started signing up. Nothing kind of rapid. Most of the people like replacing their thumb drives, replacing FTP sites, emailing themselves files, moving those to our service instead. But it really felt like there was enough kind of momentum here. People were actually paying money. We only had a paid service, no free service at the time, and so people were signing up. My co-founder and I decided to dedicate our summer between our sophomore and junior year to this. And sometimes you just get dumb luck. So I had been trying to get an internship that summer at a few different companies, including Google and a couple others, and got rejected from all those. And if I had gotten those internships, like who knows, maybe the company would have died that summer. But basically, was sort of forced into this, and it just kind of kept taking off a little bit more. So we raised some funding that summer, and then through the fall, and then dropped out at the end of the fall.
That's awesome. And I want to talk about the funding for a second, because it was a very different world than it is today, particularly in this early stage pre-seed seed world. Tell the story of your first money.
I still don't actually know what pre-seed is. So so I'm figuring all this out. But basically, funding back then was like literally just, there were no names for things. Like you just literally were just trying to survive as a company. So we raised from anybody we could. There were 2 separate rounds that summer and early fall. And this is where everybody will. I think we're about to hear a gasp in a second. We raised $80,000 and sold a quarter of the company. And I've got a couple. Thank you for the gasp. And we were fucking pumped. Like we were like, we have made it.
Yep.
Like literally, I think this is how you become a billionaire. We were like so excited to get. It was, I think, 4 checks. It was these 4 angel investors in Seattle. We got 4 different checks for $20,000. Sold a quarter of the company. We were just like on cloud. We were flying. So that was pretty cool. We instantly all that money just like went directly into like Google AdWords. So like that disappeared overnight. So that kind of ran out of excitement. And we kept pitching different people, sending emails around. And then one that really clicked was Mark Cuban. We did a cold email to Mark Cuban and pitched him and his team a couple times. And then he wrote a check for, I don't remember the exact number, but plus or minus 300,000, plus or minus maybe 50K. So about kind of $300,000 from him. Also sold a quarter of the company.
Wow.
So we're just like really into selling a quarter of the company at a time, and for nominal amounts of money. The ending's kind of happy on our end. We actually bought back both sets of investors due to kind of the circumstances the business was in. Kind of wild situation. But so that dilution, unfortunately, didn't stick. Maybe unfortunately for the investors, they decided to sell. But yeah, so that kind of gave us enough momentum to decide to ultimately drop out. But the environment was totally different. There was not, I think YC maybe, I believe, started the summer that we were doing Box full time, and that was the first class of like Sam Altman and some other folks. So that maybe, in a parallel universe, if we had maybe gotten lucky into that ecosystem, we would have had a slightly different fundraising experience. But for us, we were just two people on computers in Seattle at the time for our summer break, just trying to raise from literally anybody. So we sent emails to everybody. I like, this is just like this sounds like it has to be like not possibly real, but like I sent a literal fax to Bill Gates' fax machine. They didn't list his public phone number, obviously, but for some reason, like the fax machine was public of like the Bill Gates office. So we sent him a fax. He didn't respond, obviously, and so that didn't. And like, also, why are we pitching like at the time like the chairman of Microsoft on doing an angel round? Bizarre. So so like we would, but literally if you were listed as like you had been in tech and you had any amount of money, I'd sent you an email, I'd sent you a fax. I printed out letter on Paul Allen's security gate doorman of our business prospectus. He also didn't respond, and so we were just trying to pitch everybody. And
I love it.
Mark was crazy enough to respond, and so were this kind of small group of Seattle angel investors.
That's fantastic. Well, so you started off more on the consumer side with these bloggers, the folks signing up, storing their files. Talk to me about the pivot to enterprise. How did that come about?
Yeah, so when we started the company, the original business plan was we didn't really think in terms of personas per se. We basically just said, okay, the internet should be able to let you store data. You should be able to get access to it from anywhere. And so by definition, this could, small businesses could use it, college students could use it, people could use it for their photos, whatever the use case was. This is sort of, it transcends, kind of the kind of type of user. And so we launched this. It got traction. We dropped out of college, moved to the Bay Area. We got super lucky. We were at a very early party at the founder of TechCrunch's house, Michael Arrington, and we ran into, and this is where our worlds kind of connect at some point, but we ran into this investor, Emily Melton, at DFJ. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what her role was at the time, if she was a partner or not a partner, or what associate, who knows. But she brought us into DFJ. And then we met Josh Stein at DFJ and pitched this idea of, hey, Box will be this kind of easy to use product. We want to actually have a freemium version, so we want to let people just go adopt it on their own, and then they'll pay more money for it afterwards. And DFJ had made a lot of money on Hotmail. And I don't remember if it had exited yet or what the dynamics. So I forget all the specifics, but I think Skype. So they actually were like, if you were doing like freemium software like this, DFJ was super early on the whole freemium kind of train. So they invested, still business model independent a little bit, but Josh was also doing B2B investing, and so he kind of was getting in our ear about this idea of what if when people brought Box into an enterprise. You guys had like a version that you could sell to the enterprise. Yep. And he brought this up maybe half a dozen times. Wasn't something that I was paying too much attention to. We also had our fifth employee had been an intern at Sun Microsystems, so he kind of knew enterprise, and he was kind of starting to talk about this more. And so over about a 3-6 month period, we started to sort of eventually realize that we were being pulled in two different directions, where we had these consumer users that basically every time we talked to them, wanted to spend less money on us. They wanted more features, but those features weren't particularly differentiated. They were like, we want like a backup, for our photos on our local computer. We want, again, very, very basic things, like technically quite easy, relatively undifferentiated, and you couldn't really command a lot of, kind of pricing power for those. On the other hand, we had a lot of business users coming to us saying, well, if you had these security features and you plugged into my IT systems this way, I'll actually pay you thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars. And so to us, eventually it became this pretty straightforward IQ test of just do you chase this commoditized thing, or do you go after something where you could be more differentiated, people will pay way more? Then you overlay, at the time there were these big rumors that Google was coming out with, it was called Platypus, and then they had a couple other names, and this was basically Google Drive. And so we were like, holy shit, like basically you're gonna have Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, others go and commoditize this category on the consumer side. On the enterprise side, you had these multi-billion-dollar kind of markets that were mostly in data centers, which was like your storage infrastructure, your document management software from legacy solutions. And we kind of got increasingly pumped up about this idea that what if we took the freemium business model and the consumer approach to product, kind of execution, but use that as our kind of disruptive, way into enterprises. And I was actually probably the most resistant of the founding team initially on this path, but eventually got compelled by this idea that maybe we could not lose our consumer ethos as we go enterprise. We do this low-end disruption thing and then sell an enterprise version. So it was about a 3 to 6 month period of pivoting in kind of early 07, late 06, 07 timeframe. And then we kind of did the burn the boats thing of we're just done even thinking about consumers. We're not going to talk about them. Well, if any happen to join, that's totally fine. But we're going to do B2B, and that's going to be our business model.
Yep. And so now you're in this market, and you mentioned there's a bunch of big legacy players, huge amounts of budget funding in the space. You're still this pretty small startup. How do you think about going against these guys?
Yeah. So I started to get into Clayton Christensen at the time. Some of this is a little bit of me retelling what we were doing without kind of all of the frameworks from Clayton Christensen and others, but eventually got super into it, and kind of it's I live in if I have a religion, it is innovator's dilemma. That is my worldview on kind of 95% of capitalism is the world runs and lives and dies by innovator's dilemma. And eventually it became very clear to us that we had this sort of innovator's dilemma opportunity with the incumbents. The incumbents in our case, some of this is now, pretty, quite some time ago, so it's not as relevant to any company today, but the innovator's dilemma for a technology company in 06, 7, 8, 9, 10, let's say, building for the enterprise, the legacy players sold you, sort of packaged software that you ran yourself, that you had to hire millions of dollars worth of partners and system integrators to go install. You had to manage the data centers to actually, run the infrastructure. You built that all out yourself. You were responsible for all the uptime, everything. And their business model was to, again, keep shipping you new versions of this basically packaged software that you ran. And we, on the other hand, doing this cloud thing, we're effectively running a complete end-to-end service for them. And so we were compressing this entire stack of technology, the servers, the storage, the software, the network, the management, all of that. And that was a massive challenge for the traditional incumbents for a variety of reasons. One, the skill set was totally different. Two, their software was built in a single tenant way, which means you could really only run one enterprise at a time. We were multi-tenant, which means that we could have any number of customers, and you just kind of scale with that usage. Every time we built a feature, it goes live for everybody. Every time they built a feature, it goes live one at a time for the customers that update it. They didn't really know how to run kind of data center scale, kind of operations. So different DNA as companies, and then we could basically afford, because we were much smaller, to charge way less for this compressed version of that stack than what they could do. I mean, these were companies that had, at the time, maybe to generate $1 billion in revenue, and we only had to generate $10 million in revenue, so we could do much more disruptive things from a pricing standpoint. So the more we got into this, we realized we can just be better, cheaper, faster, simpler, and basically get ahead of the curve of all of these incumbents on mobile and integrating with all the customers' other software and ride this whole kind of SaaS cloud wave in a way that the incumbent couldn't. And so we just exploited every dimension of that. And to this day, my general advice for any kind of founder is always to find the situations where you have an asymmetric advantage versus your competition. And if you don't have an asymmetric advantage, probably any competent competition will eventually copy you because they obviously care about survival. They're not like there's no incumbents at this point that are as sort of ill-informed or idiotic as maybe they were 25 years ago. They don't exist. Yep. So you have incumbent companies that are incredibly competent, very savvy. So you always have to find what are your asymmetries. What are the things that you can do that it's not that your incumbent doesn't want to do. That's not enough. What are the things that they literally can't do? Their business model doesn't allow it. Their talent profile doesn't allow it. Their earnings to Wall Street doesn't allow it. You have to find those things. They were plentiful in our era, and so we got to exploit all those.
Awesome. So I want to shift gears to M&A. You hinted at this. Our stories do overlap, intersect 15 years ago. So my first company I started in 2007 was called Encreo, document collaboration software. We ended up raising money from DFJ. We got to know Aaron and Dylan. And in 2009, we were acquired by Box as the first M&A deal I believe you ever did.
Yep.
And so what did you learn from that? What's your approach been to M&A? How have you thought about it since then?
Yeah, I mean, it was a very critical deal for us. Jeff and Kimber basically as far as I can tell, invented being able to render documents in a web browser across formats and super seamlessly. And we really needed that technology because our whole job was to render documents. So
at the time in Box, you could upload the file and then you would click and download the file.
Yes. These are like very esoteric jokes for people. So so in the land of documents, the kind of stuff we talk about, this is like some pretty cool stuff. And it also just shows the age of a pre-seed founder that nobody realizes why this is such a big deal. So back in the day, working with documents on the internet was a very painful experience. And everyone has gotten so used to PDF.js, and like nobody realizes just like what it was like when you just could not preview something in a browser. So Jeff and Kimber had this amazing technology. We were super fortunate that DFJ kind of had invested in both of us, and so saw the possible combination. And basically, we incorporated the technology and used it for a number of years. From an M&A standpoint, so we've done, I don't know the exact number, maybe 20 or so acquisitions, and to some extent, I think the template actually was sort of defined without us knowing it by the Encreo acquisition, which is we always look for essentially fantastic technology and then fantastic founding teams and engineers in particular around that technology, and we've never done a deal that doesn't have that combination. Now, just to show that why that's different than of all the portfolio things, we don't really look for what's the biggest company? What company has the most revenue that we can acquire? What company has the most number of people that we can bring on? We really, really care about our platform and the sanctity of our platform. So we want things that let us accelerate our product roadmap, that can be pulled into the platform technology relatively quickly, and things that give us a kind of superior technical advantage for as long as possible. So all of our acquisitions, again, kind of almost look like offshoots of that original Encreo acquisition, which is critical intellectual property that we think is just profoundly important to our strategy, and then a great team that we can bring in that will actually kind of see that come to life. And we've been really fortunate to do that now a number of times. We have got lots of people in the company now running around that were the CEOs of those companies or early founders of those companies, and it's been a great experience for us. Maybe the lesson for any startup out there is to always just keep the quality bar incredibly high, not only of what you build, but of the team that you have, That just gives you the most amount of outcomes. I totally think you should never think about being acquired. Like every company needs to have a path for survival without M&A ever being a factor. But as a backup plan, or that one day when it just might kind of the stars might align, it's really important to have a company that works in an M&A environment as well. And so keeping the bar very high on that is can be very important.
Totally, could not agree more. And so as part of this M&A strategy, you recently bought a company called Alpha Moon, I think some AI technology. How have you seen AI impact your business? What's your view of AI in enterprise?
Yeah, so how many folks are enterprise, doing enterprise stuff? B2B, okay, and how many on consumer? Okay, and so I'm very biased to the enterprise side. I think enterprise will be where we see the highest kind of amount of impact from AI specifically, simply because the amount of automation that enterprises have yet really both need, and the amount of things we have to automate are just enormous. And so I think most enterprises are always looking for ways to be more efficient. That efficiency can be more clearly measured in an enterprise context than it can in a consumer context. So you just have this natural market where people want efficiency. They'll pay for it. They can measure it, and they want, like, there's a natural economic incentive for them to do that. Versus again in our personal lives, we don't really know how to quantify efficiency, so it's not as compelling. So you don't get the full breadth of AI use cases on the consumer side. So I'm massive believer in AI in the enterprise. For us, it's kind of exactly what you'd imagine, which is what if you could unlock all the value of your enterprise data? What's inside of that information that would make your business run better, help you make better decisions, help you automate more workflows. Alpha Moon is one more piece in that technology. It does this kind of capability of intelligent document processing. So you give it a contract, it tells you what's in the contract. You give it an invoice, it tells you what's in the invoice. As you can imagine, that's incredibly important to our strategy. So again, classic team, amazing technology being plugged into the platform, and we continue to pursue those types of opportunities.
Awesome. Let me say, so we have a few more questions. We'll open it up to the audience. So please submit via the QR code. We'll go through some audience questions as well. But I want to shift gears and talk about leadership. So you've now obviously been with Box a long time. Company's gone from very small to very large. How has your leadership style evolved over that time? Has it? Are you the same person you were? How do you see that? Yeah,
I think I think I'm the same person. It's always this interesting thing where I think people, I look at people that have scaled, let's say 10 times more than how much we've scaled, and I assume, like, wow, you must have had to have changed or something. And then I look at myself and I look back and what's interesting is that, like, the kind of core premise of the job today and the job at, let's say, 4 employees is not, like, radically different. We are going to live and die by how good is our product, like how good is our go-to-market in getting that product to customers, how good are we at serving customers from a customer success standpoint, how quickly can we pivot on ideas and iterate. So if you think about the job of a founder or a CEO is basically make sure your company survives or thrives. The only ways you can do that, given that we're all in product businesses, is to build an amazing product. And the only ways you can do that is like innovating quickly, getting customer feedback, iterating, like all of those things.
Yep.
So if I think about my day to day, yes, there's more constituents that I have to think about. We do more IR and Wall Street, kind of engagement. There's more analysts that we have to talk to. Certainly more customers that I can spend time with. But like the things that will that will drive whether we live or die as a company are not all that dissimilar from what they were in the earliest stages of the company. So then that means by definition I channel my time into those exact same things.
Yep.
Are we building the right thing? Is it designed the right way? Is our roadmap the right roadmap? Are we shipping features as quickly as we can? Are people working as many hours per week as they should be? So that's sort of the that is always in the back of my head about how do we drive execution, across the company. So there's not that much that has changed. In enterprise software, maybe one change, like I have to do more like steak dinners than I did, 15 years ago. And for those of you in enterprise, you're going to be doing this. You're going to go to, name your state, and you're going to host a dinner with CIOs, and you're going to talk about their IT, strategy. So you do that a bit more.
Yep.
Other than that, and maybe some Wall Street stuff, my calendar looks pretty similar. The kind of content in my head looks pretty similar. And that's what makes it fun. If it changed dramatically, I wouldn't want to do it. And I think that maybe the one interesting thing for those that haven't been in it in the same way, especially sometimes your VCs, sometimes other folks like they can almost kind of can almost accidentally sometimes convince you that there is this thing that you're supposed to be doing.
Yep. And
and I almost had this existential crisis 3 years into the company, which is like wow, all these other CEOs, they seem to look like this, or they have this kind of thing that they've focused on or done, and to some extent that was just because this was pre the era of founders that were more product centric. Yep. And then we kind of had that wave, and we realized, no, actually, that's just another archetype that you can be. But really, your main job, maybe if I add one more, kind of key aspect to survival and scaling as a company, is as a founder, is your main job is to make sure you have a team that is perfectly, kind of aligned and coordinated and can, complement each other's skills in a way that lets you execute. So as long as you can build that team. Yep. What you personally do in your role in that team can be variable by the person. So for me, it's product, but there's plenty of people that it won't be product. It'll be some other kind of thing. But the key is just, can you have a team that does all the other stuff? And I think we oftentimes early in a company, are well, maybe I'm not the right kind of CEO or all these kind of things. And it's that's the wrong way to think about it. Do you have a team that can you hold on to, can you organize a team that lets you have all those functions, and then can you lean into the areas where you have the greatest strength? And that's I think maybe the thing I've learned as we've scaled up.
That's awesome. So, I mean, you famously have extreme energy. I remember this vividly. We'd be in the office at 9, 10 p.m. bouncing ideas around. This was before either of us had kids. How do you balance that relentless commitment with building a sustainable culture that allows the company to grow and last for 20 years?
For me personally or other people?
I think both, because that's important.
Is it? Okay. For me personally, I think that the good thing is that again, if you're in a founder role, if you're doing things right and the company's working, to be clear, you should be able to, channel your energy into the areas where simultaneously you can have the most impact, but also you get the most fulfillment from. Mm-hmm. And so again, because I have the opportunity to build a team that complements and supplements all the things that I'm good or not at, that almost by definition allows me then to go and do the things that I'm going to be both most fulfilled by, but the areas that I probably have the best ability to impact. That just automatically then creates my energy, because it means I get to work on, whatever the next breakthrough product is, or what new areas of innovation, do we have happening on the technology side. That's kind of what energizes me. If my calendar were totally different, I'd probably get burned out in 3 months and not want to do it. But I've been able to again ensure that I get to channel my energy into things that are most exciting. For everybody else in the company, I think it's mostly about, can you build a culture that tries to find the intersection of maximum output and execution without sort of going over whatever the threshold is where you get negative productivity because you're dealing with people that are doing sloppy work, or where the attrition is so high that you can't retain the kind of critical tribal knowledge, or where it's just not enjoyable to work with everybody because everybody's just so sort of stressed out or whatnot. And so finding that, whatever that optimal point is always the goal. Sometimes you kind of miscalibrate or you don't quite get there, but that's kind of what I'm always trying to achieve.
That's awesome. We have a great question from the audience. How did you think about your first one or two go-to-market hires, sales? How did you build that?
Yeah.
What lessons did you learn?
Yeah, so we got really lucky on this one, and it has forced me to kind of go against the current a little bit on typical advice, but I do recognize that I'm afforded this because of our first sales hire. The typical founder advice is like you're the head of sales for a long time, and you're the one closing the deals and whatnot. And I've been able to give advice that looks different from that, which is actually you can actually get a really good head of sales that will let you get 10 times more kind of impact for your time instead of just being in sales calls all the time. This worked for us because our first head of sales that this guy Jim Herbold happened to be this kind of interesting type of sales leader where there's a really great PDF called the Enterprise Sales Learning Curve, and it was from an enterprise software executive, CEO from the 90s that basically wrote about this concept of having this kind of renaissance sales leader that kind of like knows enough about product that they don't like, that they can go into a customer meeting, figure out what are the feature gaps, take that back to the product team, all of this, instead of, maybe your typical, caricature of a salesperson, would not be to have that happen. So we lucked out. I can't tell you how we purposely landed on this person, but we did. And if you can get one of these kind of renaissance-y enterprise sales managers or leaders, then that affords you the ability to have way more augmented capacity for from a go-to-market standpoint, because it meant that we could do 10 times the number of sales calls than if I was responsible for it. I could be on a couple, but I could mostly get the feature output of like, okay, they need this, they need that, which ones should we build, how should we put it together? So I could spend my time on at least what I perceive to be much higher leverage things as opposed to one-by-one sales pitches. And that worked actually. And so that sales leader got us he scaled to 100 million in revenue. Awesome. Which is, I recognize that it's hard to have that happen, but if you can get the right person and they then hire the right people below them, it is possible to actually scale up. Everyone has this, kind of, typical wisdom of like your first sales leader is not going to work, but it can happen the other way.
So for so many people here, you start the company, you have this dream, you want to build this huge thing, and you're like, one day we'll be public.
Yeah.
You actually went public.
Yeah.
Was that a good idea? Well, like what happened?
Yeah. Well, for us, it was definitely not a part of the vision of the company. I think eventually we got maybe excited by the curiosity of it, but it was not like, something that we established as a core goal. And I was the most nervous about it. Dylan, my co-founder and our CFO, kind of to him, it was just like, obviously we're going to be public and we're going to go through that. And I kind of kicked and screamed a little bit, just because I wanted to see if we could grow a bit more privately, whatnot. But ultimately, on the other end of it, now many years later, with the caveat that like you should have a certain revenue scale just to make sure you have durability of the business model. And I highly recommend, really thinking about being cash flow positive as opposed to burning cash as a public company. Those aside, being public can be a very strong positive. It keeps your business kind of running like clockwork. Mm-hmm. When you're a private company, we often have to sort of, kind of create this channel energy about like, the quarter's going to end, we have to hit this target. But you kind of know the consequence of hitting it or not is maybe your VC will get mad or you'll have to send some email update. The consequence as a public company is every single employee is going to instantly feel it.
Yep.
Right? In the stock price. And so everybody knows that like it is do or die every single quarter on whatever those results are going to be, good or bad. So you automatically have this rhythm in the business that can be helpful. I think it up levels sort of the need for corporate governance, which I generally see as a positive thing because that creates guardrails in the company that I think can be very positive. And again, it just forces you to deal with problems faster. You just can't let things fester, particularly long as a public company. You saw it in things like, let's say, Meta, where Zuck woke up one day and just be like, shit, these areas of investment are not working. We've gotten bloated and inefficient. and we could be way more profitable. And boom, he's added about $1 trillion of market cap in 2 years. Would that kind of change and execution have happened, not as a public company? It would be hard to imagine that. So I think it does sort of force you to be on the clock and drive a certain level of intensity that can be distributed across the organization as well.
That's awesome. That's so well said. Another great audience question. Cloud storage, I'd now say, is a relatively mature market. How do you keep the excitement and new ideas? Have you considered like an adjacent business line? How do you think about that?
Yeah, so fortunately, if you just look at our revenue, kind of whatever we would call cloud storage has been a minority of our revenue for probably 10 years. So I mean, we were afraid of being commoditized in that category within the first 2 years of our existence. So, the first year was fun because we owned the market ourselves. Nobody else existed. But then all of a sudden, Google Drive showed up, a few other products. So we kind of quickly realized that the game for us was basically all the things you do with your data, not the storage of the data. And so that's workflow, that's data security, that's a bunch of these sort of business process use cases that companies do with content at scale. So just to give you some examples, like if you're a bank and you need to onboard your clients to your bank, there's a lot of documents that you sort of have to manage and collect. We will be the back-end platform that powers that for a number of banks. If you are a life sciences company that works with the FDA and you have to work on all of your audit practices of GXP compliance, we power a lot of those workflows for leading life sciences companies. So the kinds of things that are more about the business process and what you do with your content and your data, that's essentially where 98% of our engineering time goes into.
Yep, awesome. So for all the founders here, you've now met tons of founders over the years. You've had your experience and your co-founders' experiences. What aspects do you think make for a great entrepreneur who can build this type of enduring business?
I think you just have to be incredibly excited about what you're doing. And there's nothing that replaces just the raw, kind of energy of are you literally happy about what you're doing? A few factors that over the years I've realized, are important variables for me. Working on problems that you care about, obviously. So like, don't start a company because it's just this sort of temporary fad that like looks good in the news right now, and then you're just jumping on some trend because it's more likely than not that 2 years down the road, when that's not a trend and there's no hype around it, are you still going to want to be pursuing whatever that thing is? So like you should definitely assume that the excitement around whatever you're doing is a temporary kind of thing, and this is just going to be like as boring as possible in a couple of years. And will that still be exciting for you? So like and we've seen eras like this in the late 2000s, early 2010s. You'd have these periods that pop up. Everybody remembers Groupon probably, but there were like 30 Groupon copycats, and you kind of ask yourself like, why would you create a Groupon copycat? Like nobody like got out of bed one day and was like, I'm just so pumped to do sort of like temporary coupons to local restaurants. Like that was nobody, like very few people, like that was their life passion. But yet we saw like hundreds of those types of things. But obviously they all went out of business. Yep. Maybe somebody learned something for a couple of years, and so I don't fault anybody for the experience, but like you're clearly not building an enduring business. And so I'd step back and be like, are you doing something because it's like, like there's a news hype cycle around it right now, or are you really excited about what you're building? Could it outlast, once there's this kind of wave of momentum? That's critical, number one. To be fair, I didn't necessarily know that about what we were doing when we started the company, because I was, we were sophomores in college. I probably would have done anything. So I can afford to say this because I ended up finding that actually I really love what we do. But now with that benefit, I would say try and think about that a little bit. There was certainly no hype around what we were doing when we started Box. So we were going after a problem that we were passionate about. Second is the people that you're surrounded by, and I've found that one of the most enduring things about how we built the company is that I really like the people that I get to work with. I learn a ton from them. I find it fun to be in brainstorm sessions and collaborate with them. If I didn't like the people I worked with, this wouldn't work. And so 19 plus years into the company, these are the kind of things that I get me excited, and working on hard problems, working with great people, and just continuing to kind of scale up.
Awesome, fantastic. We need to end on a wild card.
Okay.
You've had this career path. What do you want the title of your biography to be?
I don't want a biography, so I'll be all good. Good to see you all. Good luck on your pre-seed startup, and just get lots of customers. Good luck.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. See ya.